Hello there everyone, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns and today I'm going to show you how to make these mermaid tiller wirework necklaces. So these are the two that I've made here. So I made a silver one and then also just a copper one here just to show you the difference. So this is what they look like, and then you just use a jump ring to attach them to whatever kind of chain that you want to, whether it's a pre-made chain like this or one that you make yourself. It completely depends on the look that you want. So the reason that I chose to make these here is because in the art world, May is known as Mermay. So basically you're prompted and challenged to make mermaid related artwork. So I thought, since we're still in May, that I would add a bit of a contribution to that as well. So these are the pieces that I came up with. So if you want to learn how to make these, then keep watching. And these are then the materials that we're going to need. Now we only really need our wire and also then our findings. So the wire that I'm using here is 2 different gauges of regular round copper wire. The first one is a 1mm. This is going to be the base wire, so the strength of the piece. And then I have a 0.4mm here, which is the weaving wire that's going to fill in the shape. And then we need our findings. So the chain that I'm using here is a plain copper chain, just to keep it nice and simple. But of course you can choose whichever kind you want to, and you can also even make your own. And then as for the clasp, I'm using a Lotto Claw clasp here, along with an extended chain, and I'm going to put it all together using the jump rings. Now check out the description box below the video as well. I'm going to put the material list down there, that might be helpful. Otherwise, let's get all the materials ready, and let's get started. Then the length of wires that we'll need is a length here of about 1mm, so the base wire of about 30 centimeters. So we're going to make the shape with this. And then for the weaving wire, we need one length of about 1 meter and 60 centimeters first of all. And then we also need another length of the weaving wire of about 60 centimeters. So then the first thing we're going to do is make the shape, and to do that I'm going to get out the length that I already cut ready of my 1mm here, so the base wire. And you just want to make sure as well that this is nice and straight so there's no kinks or anything in it, because that could affect the shape that we're making. So if you're comfortable working freehand, of course you can do that, but what I'm going to be doing is actually working from a little sketch here that I've already made, just so I kind of can use this actually as a template, and I'm a bit more sure of getting the shape right. And this way you can also fully decide on the design that you want before actually starting to make it. Now all we're going to really need is making the outline of the shape that we want here, so you can really play around with different design ideas before you actually even start making it. So that's why it's handy as well having this little sketch. Now if you like the shape here that I've made, what I'm actually going to do as well is have this available on my website. So this little template I've made, you can then just print it off if you want to, and then just follow this as it is. And that way you could also even make it different sizes depending what size you print it off in. Now the way that I'm going to make this here is actually starting from that very middle point to that curve right there. And that also means I'm going to start at the very middle of the wire. So find roughly where that is, because then I'm going to work with the rest of the lengths on either side and gradually make one side kind of simultaneously, and also to get it as symmetrical as possible. Now I'm going to be using a couple of different pliers here to get the shape in place. So first of all I have a pair of round nose pliers. So this is really just to get the small little curves nice and even. I'm also going to be using this pair of 6-step bail making pliers, mainly really for the larger curves. So I'm going to be using the larger steps there just to get them nice and even again. So you can use this, or you can use any kind of mandrel if you don't have this pair. And I'm also just going to have my chain nose pliers handy here just to help control the wire. So I start with my round nose pliers here then and place them in the middle of the wire, and I'm placing them pretty far up the pliers, so we're only going to use a small end. And then I just want to take the two tails and bring them around in the same direction there. So they come down like this, and this is, like I said, that middle little curve, and just tighten that up nicely. Should look something like that. And now I then bring in my 6-step bail making pliers here because we need to make a larger curve, and for that I'm just going to be using the second largest step on my tool. So we just do one side at a time here. You can just open it up a little bit as well, so the two ends there, the two tails, just open it up so we can get the pliers in. So obviously there's not that much space in there, especially for the large steps on the pliers. But then I grab around one side first of all, keep hold of my bend or curve that I've already made, and then start to bring this around, because I need to get that large curve in place. But like I said, it's a little bit difficult because the pliers don't really fit in that little gap. We just gradually bring it up further and further. Bring that curve into it. Make sure that the tail kind of keeps going out towards the side. You can always keep rolling it further. And then obviously we want to do the same on the other side as well. So this isn't final anyway. We can always go back and, like I said, compare it to that sketch that we have. And then we can adjust it as we go, and you can see this side is much easier to get the pliers in now. So also shape that around, bring that up. Until they're about even, and then what we can do is also, like I said, compare it to the sketch and see how far down these curves need to sit compared to that very first middle initial curve. How far we need to bring them up. Like that, bring that back out to the side. I'm just going to tighten up the other side a bit more so they get a bit more even than that, because you can see that's a bit further down. So just keep kind of maneuvering it until it's pretty symmetrical, and then we'll compare it to the sketch. So then getting that sketch back in so we can just compare, and then take the little piece of wire that I've made so far and just put it right there in the middle, and you can see that fits pretty nicely. So now the next step is to get these larger curves going in the opposite direction to come down towards the point down here, obviously on both sides as well. For that I'm going to be using the larger step of my pliers again. So again, just using that second largest step there on my pliers, and then I'm bringing the tail this side first of all, just down and around towards coming straight down. And then again, if we need to tighten it up, we can always roll it a bit closer, or roll it outwards if we need to open it up. So that come down there, and then on the other side I'm going to do the same. And just like before, I'm just going to kind of get the shapes in place, the curves in there, and I can always adjust the sizing of things and the positioning of everything. Bring that down as well, because then we can kind of compare and see what the symmetry is like. So something like that there. And comparing it to the sketch again, just to make sure everything is sitting right. And then put my wire on top of that there. You can see how to use that little template we've made. So now the next point here is kind of the point on either side, the small curve again, that we then need to bring the wire back up around to then create the rest of the little tail as well. And for that, I'm then going to take my round nose pliers again, place them where I want that little small curve to be, around the same place on the pliers as that very middle one. So it just becomes around that same size. Then I bring the tail of the wire towards the outside, back and around the pliers, so it comes back up kind of towards itself, just like that here. And then of course we just want to do the same on the other side. And then we bend that other side also just towards the outside here to get it around the pliers and come back upwards again. Something a bit like that. And then obviously we just want to double check, make sure they're as even as possible, so they have as good as possible the same length there, because obviously otherwise you can adjust that now by either rolling it out a little bit or tightening it up a bit more in the exact same way as the other curves. So now we have the wires going straight up, so we need to get to the top part now that's going to kind of finalize the shape of the little tail. And here I'm then just going to use my hands and fingers to help shape this, because it's just quite a large kind of curve in the piece we need. So just make sure you smooth out the wire and you gradually just put a curve into it. I like to kind of grab hold of it a bit further down the wire and then just bring it over, forcing a curve into it like this, over towards the opposite side. And the same on the other side, and again I just do a bit at a time, because then we can always adjust it when we can then look at the piece. Something a bit like this, so the crossover there in the middle. And then we can also decide basically how large we want this to be from this point. So obviously how far up we want these curves to go. So also make sure they're as symmetrical as possible, so the curves here are nice and even as much as they can be. And then just to make the top part, instead of the wires crossing over each other like this, I need to bring them back out to their own side, but by adding a curve into it. So again, I take my 6-step bell making pliers, I'm using the second largest step yet again for that bit of a larger curve. And just start with one side, and you just want to judge this, because when we bend these back up, we need there to be a bit of a gap between them. Just place your plier and then add that curve in by bringing the wire upwards. Obviously you can still adjust it. and then place the pliers on the other side and then bring that up, something like that. And obviously it's a matter of right now just getting it as even as possible before we just get right at the top to finish it off. So if you need to tighten up any curve or anything else, you see how even it is. And if it's not quite even enough, you can just adjust it a bit more until you're happy with it. But making sure that these two tails basically are coming straight up towards them being able to finish it off. So once you're happy with the shape, it looks a little something like this. And then what we need to do is finish it off at the top then, also make the loop so we can obviously attach it to something like a chain. So I've just put my pliers to the point where I want to make this last little loop and kind of finish off this main shape. And I've just put it to the point there, the size, where that fits nicely just between these two base wires. And then I'm just going to do one at a time. Bring this wire over to the opposite side so you can see it just kind of curves around like that and just straight out to the side. And then I'm going to flip it around, put my pliers on the other wire, which will then be in the same place there. Just use the other one as a guide. And then bring that to the opposite side to finish off the shape nicely. And these two now lay basically on top of each other, flat next to each other there, going out to each their own side. So it looks a little something like this now. And then I'm swapping to the smallest step on my pliers and placing it right at that point there in the curves that we just made and across both of the base wires. Because now we just have to make the little loops. So place the pliers there to grab hold of the wires so they don't move around. And then this one going towards the bottom in my case, that's the one laying below. So I'm going to bring that around that small loop all the way around to basically make a circle, keeping it underneath the other one. So I want to bring it around, make sure it comes underneath. So we can more or less make a full circle there. You can just reposition your pliers to be able to make a full circle like that. Now obviously we have to do the other one, so we just got to get the pliers back in place. And then we just take the other wire, now this is the top one, and literally bring it around the same way but just opposite, and also to make a full circle. And then we've basically achieved two circles here, but they lay right on top of each other, so it's kind of just going to appear as if there's one. And bring it around so we have that full circle, a little something like that with both of them. And you can tighten it up however you need to, bring that over a little bit more. So there we go. It now looks like this. So we just got to get rid now of the excess lengths of the base wires there, because then that finishes them off nicely as well. And then we just got to get on with the weaving. So to cut off the excess, I take my flush cutters here so we can get a nice clean cut. And then just one side at a time, I'm going to cut off the excess so we still keep that round circle, the full loop. But then once we cut off the excess, the very end of the wire is basically going to be sticking up against the side of itself, but creating that full circle. So just place your pliers right at that point and then cut it off, something like that. And then rather cut off too little than too much, because if you can see there, this is actually not quite enough. We need to cut off a little bit more because it's just overlapping itself still. But rather cut off too little, like I said, because you can always cut off a bit more, just like this, a little bit at a time, rather than if you cut off too much, then obviously you can't really add any more wire. Just a little bit more again, just doing about 1 millimeter or so at a time to have control, so we can end up getting it to lay nice and flat against itself. And then you can take your flat nose or chain nose and basically just push them together. So you push that flat, which then makes the end, let me just get my pliers in there, sit right up against the side of itself, basically like that. And that's exactly what we want, because then that finishes it off nicely and securely, so we don't have to worry about it catching or scratching on anything. Obviously you just want to do the same with the other one as well, so we then have these just complete loops laying right on top of each other. So then once we have our shape in place here, like I said, we then need to fill it in with our weaving wire. So what we take first of all is the longest length that we cut, and I'm starting to work towards one end of it. Just leave a short little tail there, because first of all we need to just attach this. And I'm starting up from the point here just below these loops. Now obviously also be aware that this is loose because it's two separate loops that we've made. It's not connected yet, but this is going to get fixed by the weaving wire, because we're going to fill this in and it's going to make this area stronger, and then basically make it not loose like that. So place that tail of the weaving wire behind and grab onto these loops here to hold it in place, and then I first of all attach it around this bottom end of the weaving, or the base wire, sorry, by bringing it around down through the piece. Now obviously it's a bit of a length to work with, so just bring it all the way through nice and gently, and then you push this down as far as it'll go, and then wrap it around again. Now I like to kind of push my wire through like this when I have a bit of space in my shape there, instead of going right to the end and then finding that I bring it through. You can do that, but I find it obviously is a bit more time consuming, but also it tends to be more likely to get kinks that way. Whereas here, you kind of push it through just like this here, but then you just kind of pull the rest of it through gently. So I find that that works the best. But now the wire here is attached. And then what we can do is start to actually weave, filling it in by using the figure of 8 weave, going from side to side. So make sure you have hold of these loops, because then we need to go over to the other side, and it's coming below there. Now the first part is the fiddliest part because like I said it's loose, but just once you've done a couple of wraps back and forth, it's much easier and it kind of holds its shape by itself. Again, bring the wire down through, but now it's just wrapping on the other side. Again, push it all the way down. So the first few wraps there are going as tight to those loops as possible. And then down through again, just like this. Pull it all the way through, nice and gently. And make sure your wraps here become nice and tight, close together. To do that, you can also help using a pair of pliers just to help push them together, especially around up here, where obviously there's not that much space. But then that's twice around that side, so now go back to the other side again. So just come in below, come back to the first side. Make sure you double check that everything is still how you want it to sit, because we can just adjust that right here at the beginning, but once we've done a few wraps, then it's going to be fastened more in place. So we want to make sure that it stays exactly how we want it to. Come back to this side down here, and then go down through the shape again. And then wrap around the side once, and then down through again to do it twice. And then once you've done it the twice, push that nice and close. We then switch over to come over to the other side and do the same. So I'm just wrapping around twice and then swapping to the other side, and that then gradually fills in the space while we then work our way further and further up, and then you're going to be able to see the really filled in shape of this little tail. But then once we get further up here, we just need to maybe swap it around a little bit. Same principle, but just slightly make it different how we do it. So now I kept weaving and I'm reaching the point where my base wires start to kind of go more apart from each other. So they graduate outwards there, so you can see we get more space between them. Then the difference in that, it's the same basic technique like I said. We still go from this one side underneath over to the other side. But the only difference is, and it's a bit of a judgment call, is that instead of going through like this once, push that down and then come around again and go through again, and then it's twice, that in some cases you might need to do it 3 times, because it's just to help with the space in between the weaves. So here for instance, do it 1 more time, because it graduates outwards on the base wires there. It just creates a slightly different look, but like I said, it's quite a judgment call. Sometimes you might need to do it, sometimes you might not. So it's really down to you whether you want to do it twice or 3 times, what you think looks best on your piece. And then come back over again to the opposite side. And then like I said, just keep going like this until you then reach a point where the middle of your weave there actually bumps in to that very middle small curve right there. So I've now reached that point there, so you can see if I keep wrapping the same way across from one side to the other, then you can see that middle point there, the little curve is going to actually start getting in the way. So instead of doing that, we need to keep wrapping, but now we're just going to focus on one side. So we're actually going to now come from this point where I've ended up down here, and then actually connect to the middle instead, and then just wrap this side, complete this, and then we do this separately afterwards. So it's coming across the back there. To get it to that midpoint, I'm just going to take my chain nose pliers just to help put the wire in position, and I just grab my weaving wire right behind where that curve is, basically where I want it to connect, just to help it in place, or something like that. So it's going to slot in there, and now I need to use this area to wrap back and forth with instead, but we just have to kind of make sure we force the wire to stay in the place where we want it to. But otherwise it's the same principle. Bring it down and push it all the way so it sits in the middle. Now this can be a little bit tricky because first of all, obviously it's kind of a different shape we're wrapping now, but also because this is actually now getting narrower instead of getting wider. And what the wire tends to want to do when you wrap with a weaving wire is it wants to slip towards a narrow point naturally, so you have to kind of counteract that with how you wrap your wire. And I'm just using pliers here to help push it as far down as I can get it into the point, and then I try hold on to that while I then do another wrap and push that down all the time. And I still have a bit of space to kind of just feed my wire through like this, but we will kind of run out of space at some point, so you will have to start getting to the end of the wire when we get further down here, but not just yet. Again, you can see this kind of keeps wanting to move upwards, but just keep pushing it down. So obviously we get a nice transition between the long wraps across the whole way to this point here as well, so it's not too obvious. Get that as far into the middle as you can. But then otherwise you keep wrapping across here back and forth, following the shape now until we then reach the point, just laying right across from here, where we have this length of the base wire kind of going a bit more straight across. So just reach until there. So once I reach that point there, you can see I don't really have more space, but the base wire is going more straight across to the side like that. So just to adjust for that, all we're going to do is, I've ended up with my weaving wire on this side here where I have that straight piece of base wire, and all I'm going to do is continue wrapping it around as if I was just continuing doing it on this side here. So I'm coiling my weaving wire around the base wire just continuously after each other, basically right until I get to the point where the base wire starts to come down the opposite direction again, and we can start weaving from side to side again. So just do that until you can pick that back up, and when you then feel you're in that position there, we can just pick up the weave going back and forth from side to side again. Obviously now we're in a place where there's much less space, so that's why also now I'm going to actually start bringing the end of my weaving wire through, just to also have a bit more control. But just go from side to side again, and I'm just going back to doing it twice around each side, just like this, until we get down to the very little curve on the bottom there, and then we need to finish off the weaving wire. Once we then reach the bottom, all we've got to do here is that little bit of base wire that we have left kind of bare there, we just want to cover that to make it blend in nicely. So all I'm going to do again is, I've ended up on this side, so you just want to keep wrapping the weaving wire around just to cover that base wire to get to the other side, and then we can finish it off. So I've done the last wrap there, you can see it's coming around, and then to finish it off I'm just going to take my flush cutters, cut off the excess, making sure I have my last wrap going in that direction, and then I cut it also, I have about just a tiny little tail left of about 1 millimeter or so. Get the wire out of the way, and then I take my chain nose pliers, just because right now you can feel if you put your finger over it you have some wire sticking out. That little end, you just want to push that in, and I like to push it down and then just roll my pliers in the direction that the wraps are going to really tuck it in, so the end actually ends up in there between the base wires, nicely out of the way. So that's now finished off. So now we need to get the other length of the weaving wire out, and this is the short one. And this is then what we use to fill in the other side of the shape. Now to make it a little bit easier on ourselves, what we're going to do is actually start from that bottom point where we finished on the last one, because it's going to be easier weaving from the narrow to the wider, just like we originally did up here. Obviously now that we have that choice, we might as well do that. So I'm going towards the end of my weaving wire, and then we just got to check here what direction the wraps are going in up on this side, because it's going to end up meeting up there. So just to kind of make it match nicely. In this case, I then have my wraps going in this direction here. So that means I actually now want to lay my tail on top of my base wire. It can be a little bit fiddly to hold on to, because I first of all just want to attach my weaving wire in this very little curve on the bottom. So hold on to that. And then again, I'm just going to use the very end because we have a tiny little space. Bring that through. Get it attached. So now I'm actually starting by wrapping across the very bottom curve there where we finished on the last one. And just keep doing that until you basically reach from that one side to the other side. And also then your wire is attached. And once you then have that, we can basically pick up the weave again. So we have that little bottom curve in place. So I'm just going to go to the opposite side. And otherwise do the exact same thing, weave now from side to side. And basically what we want to do is the exact same that we did on the opposite side here when we filled that in, but just in reverse. So obviously we're starting from the very bottom now, the narrow point, and then we're working our way up. First of all, this little short section, then we'll get to that point where we need to kind of wrap around the wire that's going straight across to the side, just coiling around that until we can then fill in the wider point. And then we need to end up with our weaving wire right there in the middle. So I then filled in that side there, and I've ended up with my weaving wire right there in the middle. And make sure you just wrap around a few times around that bare base wire, also to make it blend in nicely. Now all that's left to do here is get rid of the excess tails. So basically just do one at a time and finish them off in the exact same way as I showed you there. So cut off the excess and then tuck it away. So now I've finished off all the ends of the wires, and then this is what my necklace looks like, and it's all ready to wear as well. So I just made that copper one there, showing you in the tutorial, but then I also just made a silver one, again to show you how they can look different. And then what you then just do is you use these little loops at the top. You can just attach a jump ring through them and attach if you want to use chain or anything else that you want to use, your personal preference. And then like I said, it's ready to wear. And I've also got my clasp here on the end, and it hangs nicely on the neckline. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial for this mermaid's tail. So a little participation in Mermay. Just thought that would be kind of interesting. So I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching it. Feel free to check out my channel for loads of other tutorials, especially wirework ones as well. It's one of my favorite mediums to work with. Thank you so much for watching this one, and I'll see you in the next one.